welcome to Why We Wonder. Woo! This is our first episode. I'm Joseph Bark.
I'm Brock Beavers.
I am Charles B.
I'm Sophia Cagnoni.
And Travis Bradford.
So we're gonna kick things off. Our first connection of the three is gonna be utilitarianism and grammar of animacy.
Whoa.
Yeah. So utilitarianism.
What is that? Tell us.
The utilitarianism is the idea that actions are right if they are useful or for the benefit of a majority. So when I think of utilitarianism, like in my life at least, so I'm a YMCA counselor. So at the YMCA, I work with a bunch of kids, and obviously when I'm there, I want to do, like if I pick a game or something for them to do, I want something that benefits the majority. Because sometimes you'll pick something and there'll be like 1, 2, maybe even 3 kids that like, I hate this, I don't want to do that. But from a utilitarian view, if I'm picking something that most of the kids want to do, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so I guess I kind of align with that, I guess, when I work. But yeah. And then I guess we can go into grammar of animacy now and give a definition of that.
So, grammar of animacy is basically a linguistic worldview that views nature as alive. And so, like in utilitarian view, we have like 2 classifications that are objects or people. And then in grammar of animacy, we have animate objects and inanimate objects. And it's just like how we use the language. For example, in Western cultures, we'll say like it's to describe natural elements such as a river, whereas in grammar of animacy, it's kind of viewed as in the same way as humans are.
So I guess the big question for these 2 connections is our contemporary use of animacy, that we use today, aligned with a utilitarian view of the world? So that's for anyone to answer.
Personally, I don't think it is. I think even like when you mentioned how we call things it, like you ever see someone refer to like a young child as an it, it's kind of like, it's funny, but it's also clear the connotation, I guess, that's brought with words like that, even with it not being a necessarily derogatory like word that's used, it still carries a negative connotation depending on how it's used and what we're used to using the word for. And I think a lot of words, especially with like the articles that we read, a lot of words can be used to demean certain populations or like groups that have been historically marginalized, and it marginalizes them further through that use of the words or whatever the case is. So I think if we did have a utilitarian view on the words we use and how we use them, I think, for instance, words like getting bent or getting fucked, or that power dynamic that's within so many I guess topics, but like it's also present in the sentence and how you word it and how you structure it. So I think currently no, but it could be.
I was going to say it's also a lot easier to justify the exploitation of nature for human use if we use like certain language, such as addressing like elements of nature as it, because it like just like devalues it and places like less respect as opposed to humans.
Yeah, I think that by removing the agency from nature and putting all the agency into human beings, what you do is now, in a utilitarian perspective, if we can either view it from 2 ways, it's either utilitarian in sense of the world and all of its aspects, or just utilitarian in sense of human value. And in human value, sure, it's more utilitarian to only prescribe animacy to us, because then it's like egocentric, we feel better about ourselves and we get to control the world. But if we're seeing utilitarianism from like a worldly perspective, from everything involved into one, I think that by removing the animacy from nature or from anything that isn't human is doing negative towards that, and now we get to control it and do it wrong.
Yeah, I agree. It takes away the blame, I guess, or like there's no. It's like a victimless crime because it's a tree, but like it's still a tree that has implications when it's torn down and it still negatively impacts people. So is it a victimless crime? I don't know.
I think that's also used for like war as well, like justification. Like I know the Vietnam War, the Americans would use like a lot of terms for the Vietnamese people to like kind of dehumanize them and make them easier to kill. Like calling them just like the Viet Cong and stuff like that, even though that's what they were. Like they'd call like citizens that as well, just to like dehumanize them, so it'd be easier for them to just kill random people like whenever they'd like. Like I know a lot of numbers of the Viet Cong were like inflated because these Americans dehumanized these villagers and these innocent civilians to the Viet Cong, and they just would murder them and like inflate the number as well. But they would use the utilitarian aspect of it, saying, "Oh, this is for the greater good. This to spread democracy and prevent the spread of communism." So
While using words to
it dehumanized them.
Yeah, I think perception's everything, and that kind of goes into like the next group of terms we have with skepticism, saying that you can't necessarily trust every sensical outcome you come to, I guess, if that's a way to say it. The second term, I guess, in that conglomerate is indigenous conceptions of knowledge, which kind of refer to a tailored set of cultural knowledge passed through generations that is specific to like the area that culture was cultivated in. And I think the two terms kind of interact in a way that indigenous conceptions of knowledge values that sensical, the way in which you gain the knowledge, which is through your senses, and skepticism, I guess, challenges that at its core. So my question for those terms was, do indigenous conceptions of knowledge address the concept of skepticism in a meaningful way? Do you guys think?
I think that both skepticism and indigenous conceptions of knowledge, they kind of they don't reject, but they don't necessarily agree with the idea of a hard truth. Like skepticism is more like, how could we ever know that? And indigenous knowledge is like, why would we even care?
Yeah.
And so the indigenous knowledge seeks more to find like those practical mindsets for things. Like instead of finding out, for instance, like the knowledge of why certain crops work together, instead it's better to just tell it as a story of like three sisters that work well when they're planted together.
Yeah.
Of like the three like squash beans, I don't know. But so that's kind of that example of the practical knowledge rather than not real, but like hard truth knowledge. And then skepticism is kind of just like, we don't know if we can actually know that, because how could we know anything?
Right. It feels kind of like a cycle of just like what if, rather than actually basing it in any practical use of techniques, I guess, like for farming or whatever the case is, where you're in a culture that has ingrained those practices and techniques in their day-to-day throughout their whatever community they have. So yeah, I agree. I think skepticism, it kind of addresses the same topic, but like in a different way. It doesn't really give an answer, I don't feel like.
Yeah, I'd say that indigenous knowledge, like their interpretation of it, provides a solution to skepticism. Because it's rather than just stopping at skepticism, it's let's move past this. Like, we can't be sure of things. We can still work on knowledge. We can still just have practical knowledge, even if it doesn't have to be necessarily true, as long as it works. So it just removes that, like, blockage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, like, the overall, they just both challenge the assumption that knowledge is, like, simple or straightforward. And, like, there's different ways of learning or, like, acquiring knowledge.
And I think that's especially important, sorry, just because what you mentioned earlier, like with the Viet Cong, if people know that people are still being killed, but their perception is that it is, their perception is still being altered in a way that allows them to pass this through their brain, I guess, and make it seem okay to them. So I think, yeah, it also ties back into that, like, the way you carry knowledge and how you, I guess, categorize it in your brain is very important with how you use it. And then, like, I think plays into the concept of indigenous knowledge as well, because if you know something, you know it works, you'll know to implement it in your own communities and stuff like they're just very interconnected in that way, I think. And it's just important to know what knowledge and why it's, like, how it's presented and why it's affecting you the way it is. And that brings me to the last one, the last pair of terms that are ethical subjectivism and empiricism. Does anyone know what ethical subjectivism is?
So ethical subjectivism is like moral judgments that are based on individual feelings and opinions rather than objective truths, like your subjective opinions and stuff that you come up with on your own board, rather than something that's objectively what it is.
Right. So, like, under an ethically subjective viewpoint, could you, I guess, permit the killing of citizens in Vietnam under a utilitarian viewpoint if it's being presented to you that it's a good thing, or that these citizens are actually Viet Cong? Or are you not absolved because you didn't, like, verify or use another system of knowledge to find out like the real truth, or like a different truth, I guess? Sorry, that sounds so confusing, but I'm just saying, like, could you be like, it's okay for them to die because your ethical subjectivism says that more people would be happy with these enemies, I guess, wiped out, despite the impact being you're killing innocent people?
I'd say, I want to say no, but like,
yeah, like, I think it's wrong. I think that's just like the whole with ethical subjectivism, I guess.
Yeah.
Which leads me to empiricism, which is essentially knowledge gained from sensical contact with it, I guess. So, like, sight, seeing, smell, whatever.
Actual experience.
Yeah, like, actually experiencing something makes it known to you. And so, like, that's where the question essentially was coming from. Like, if you are experiencing this truth that someone's telling you, does it make it okay to then act in a way that is indirectly harmful to other people, even though you're under the premise of helping them?
I don't think it's right, but to be fair to the American people back then as well, I know that the American government was pushing out a lot of propaganda, and the public was practically brainwashed into thinking that these people, oh, we're on the right side of humanity, these people are the villains, like, we need to stop them. So I don't think it's right at all that, like, your perceptions are, like, what should guide your moral judgments.
But
at the end of the day, what you perceive in life is what you believe to be true. So it's like, if you see someone, like, if you punch someone and you see, like, they got hurt, right? You're less likely to punch them, right? Because you feel bad. But, like, these people were, like, going to war, like, you can't even see the only people, like, you're shooting most of the time and whatnot. And it's just like, you're just hearing, like, oh, these people sound different, look different, are different from me. Like, what's so bad about doing all this?
Yeah, I agree.
I agree, like, because empiricism is like, you have that blank slate at birth, and then you come to, like, see these things, like, people will tell you, oh, this is wrong, this is right. So if, like, from a young age, you get that blank slate, and someone is telling you that this is the right thing, for a long time we believe that's the right thing, even if
Yeah, without
but-
checking.
Yeah, but then when you get older, you might think, oh, that's actually not right at all. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I guess that's when skepticism would come into play, or like in handy, I guess.
Maybe. I think that the problem between empiricism and ethical subjectivism is empiricism is that there is no knowledge other than what we have perceived. And then ethical subjectivism follows the same route where it's like our ethics are based on what we perceive, which means that there's no truth greater than what we can see. So there's no overarching moral truth. That's why they're kind of like they're reliant on each other. Whereas ethical subjectivism is reliant on empiricism in the sense that if like the whole empirical thought is that everything that the only things that can be true are the things that we can prove to ourselves to be true through experience. But there are certain, if we are to have moral truth, that is like universal, empiricism can't be the only factor.
Yeah, it has to be literally something external to it.
Yeah, I think they relate in like ethical subjectivism says that morality is subjective. So if empiricism says that we learn through experience, we all have different experiences, so it's going to be subjective either way.
Yeah. Well, that was our podcast segment.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks for watching.